This email we got was from the United States Department of Agriculture, and they were plowing up crops across the nation, dumping milk, chickens, and hogs. And I believed this email was to prepare us for that possibility with cattle.
Why is it such a big deal where people are given a pushback of where the meat is coming from?
As a consumer, you don't know what you're buying. It oppresses our prices because there's no competition for it.
Why should the consumer care?
We are importing beef and we are destroying our harvests at a time when people don't have jobs.
Is it similar to what Walmart did to a lot of mom and pop shops and put them out of business?
It's the same thing.
Who's the Amazon of your world?
I'm not sure there is an Amazon of our world.
Maybe there's an idea right there.
We don't want the government getting in on our beef industry. Sonny Perdue, he's a globalist. 2 of our 4 main beef packers are Brazilian owned, and they've been caught in these fraudulent cases in their own countries. What do you think they're doing in the United States?
Tyson Food, Cargill, JBS, National Beef, those are the 4 you're talking about.
There will be a takeover of our industry, and then a lot of these producers will become serfs to the oligarchy, and I think that's where we're headed. We have to be able to feed the world at a profit. We can't do it at a loss. Who fills my shoes now in this time and age? Nobody. Only multinational corporations.
You can't tell me work hard. I come from a family, we all worked hard.
There are smart people in this industry. They're innovative. That's why we have the best product in the world.
Could you easily sell others to consider getting into your industry today?
Unless you marry it or inherit it, you ain't gonna have it. It's financially impossible.
30 seconds.
Did you ever think you would make it? I feel I'm so close I could taste sweet victory. I know this life meant for me. Yeah, why would you bet on Goliath when we got Bet David? Valuetainment, giving values contagious. This world of entrepreneurs, we get no value to haters. How they run, homie, look what I become. I'm the one.
My guest today is an American cattle rancher, Shad Sullivan, whom a video recently went viral, getting millions of views, where a bunch of people reposted, and he said a couple lines that caught my attention: euthanizing millions of chickens, dumping milks, depopulating the cattle ready to harvest. And I looked at that stuff and I listened to his message a few times, and I said, Mario, why don't you see if you can get a hold of Shad? And Shad and Mario got on the phone together. And Shad used the famous line. What was the line he told you? He said, "Don't josh me. I'm just joshing you." That just tells you where he lives. He lives in North Texas, and we want to kind of find out what's going on in the industry today. So, Shad, thank you for making the time to be on Valuetainment.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So, what happened from you going out there and giving your message? And just assume some of the people that are watching this haven't heard you on what happened. So, give us an update on what's going on in your world.
Well, the reason I did the video was we were working out in the field and we got an email alert, and this email we got was from the United States Department of Agriculture, and in that email it said they would be forming a group of people to come out and help producers move their animals that were unable to move to a marketing system, an alternative marketing system. And I told myself right then, I'm like, well, there's not many alternative marketing systems right now, thanks to COVID. And then it went on to say these groups of individuals comprised of state veterinarians and other state officials would help in the depopulation and disposal of said animals. It didn't say cattle, but said animals if the need arose. So it kind of set me off, and I'm like, I don't like the sound of this. It made me mad. I had just remembered 2 days before we imported some beef from Africa, and I knew what the supply chain in other industries was doing. I mean, we had seen what they were plowing up crops across the nation, dumping milk, chickens, and hogs, and I believed this email was to prepare us for that possibility with cattle. My dad had told me about the 1930s and 1950s when they had to depopulate due to drought and disease. Now, this is a whole different circumstance, but it is one that could come to fruition even now because the COVID has created a problem in our processing facilities that these workers are afraid to come to work due to the COVID. And so that's creating a bottleneck or a backlog of cattle that need to be harvested. And I think right now we could be close to 1 million head that, some are 7 weeks out from their original harvest date. And that's causing the backlog or the backup of meat in the system. We can't get the supply of beef through the system to the consumer. There are cattle, our supply of cattle, live cattle is great. The demand is great. It's getting it through the system that has become a problem. And so that's what really got me frustrated. And I said, we are importing beef and we are destroying our harvests at a time when people don't have jobs. And that's not the American way. It didn't make sense. And they were dusting off the books and the protocol was there for that to start happening. And so I was just a little bit upset by that. I just off the cuff did the video. I'm not a guy that usually does things like that. And it went what they call viral. And here we sit today. I told my wife, I said, maybe I should take that off. I don't want to panic people. Our food supply is safe. We have issues with it. And she said, no, the American people need to hear the truth. And so we have some industries out there that don't want to, speak the truth. And that's how I got to you today.
How does that affect the average person? So imagine I'm not in your world. I don't know what's going on. All I do is I either watch CNN, MSNBC, or I either watch Fox, or I get my news from social media. I'm one of those three. How am I impacted by what's going on to you?
Well, you're impacted by a supply issue and a food safety issue. So what has happened down through the years is our federal government has allowed acquisitions and mergers of multinational corporations to take over our food supply system. So in the beef industry, for example, we have 4 companies that control 85% of the beef cattle supply chain. Okay, so there we are putting our eggs in one basket, so to speak. So what happened is the COVID come in, we get these sick people, and because our eggs are in one basket, we have the inability to process those animals to get to the consumer, right? So the power those companies have funnels down to the consumer. You're no longer able to get your product. Number one. Number two, the safety, they're importing a lower quality beef into our supply and mixing it onto our supply, which is increasing their profits, oppressing our profits, and kind of gouging the consumer. So you don't know exactly what kind of product you're getting. It does come down to a food safety issue and a liberty issue as far as I'm concerned.
So Shad, based on what I'm seeing, there's 4 different business models here. You got the producers at the beginning, then you got processors, then distributors, then retailers, right?
Yes, and there's even more to that. So you have the cow-calf producer. That's the man who owns the cow, and they have a baby calf.
Is that what you do? That's what you do?
That's not what I do.
Walk me through.
Okay, so there's the cow-calf producer. Those calves grow to a certain weight. They wean them off of the cow, and then they go to a man who I am, called a stalker operator. And so I buy that calf, and I grow that calf to a certain weight. And in my part of it, I do it on grass. So I grow them on grass to a certain weight, say 800 pounds. And then I sell those animals to what they call the feedlot industry. The feedlot industry can be captive supply. There's all sorts of different aspects to that industry, but they grow them to a certain weight and prepare them for harvest. And then you have the harvesting side of the industry, and then you go on to on up the chain to retail.
So you said the 4 companies that own 85%, whether it's Tyson Food, Cargill, JBS, National Beef, those are the 4 you're talking about, right?
National Marfrig, yep.
Okay, so those 4 that you're talking about, where do they fall under those processes? Are they the producers, the processors, the distributors, or the retailers? Obviously, they're not.
They're the processors and distributors.
They're the processors and the distributors. And is it fair to say that they're not necessarily the small business owners? They're the too big to fail type of models in your world. Is that a pretty?
That's correct.
Okay, so how do they bully you around as the small business owner? Because maybe they can afford to go through 6 months of bad times where a lot of folks in your world cannot. So what role do they play in making it difficult for you?
Well, they have taken away all competition. So with the acquisitions and mergers over the last 25 or 30 years, they have gained more power and control, and that has eliminated the competition. So let's say 30 years ago, there would have been 800 processors across the United States able to process and harvest this beef, where now there are only 4 main processors that harvest 85% of that chain. So what they have done is they've totally eliminated cash competition, right? And what that does is that has created their power to go network down and take control of the industry that way.
Again, so how does that affect me? Because imagine the consumer is one-dimensional thinker. And here's what I mean. The consumer says, is the meat good? Is it healthy for my kids? Is it gonna be cheap? Check, I'm good to go. Why should I, the consumer, be so concerned about what's going on?
Because there's a concentration. So there's an oligarchy of power and control at the top of the food, at the top of the chain, right? And that trickles down to you. So they are able to eliminate competition in the United States while bringing in cheaper, lower quality meat from other countries, 18 other countries, and they can put that on top of our meat, mix it in the grind or mix it in. You can go to the grocery store and you may buy a cut of beef that says product of the USA, but that does not mean that it is a product of the USA. So basically what I'm telling you is, as a consumer, you don't know what you're buying. You don't know the food safety, because every country has different safety inspection standards, right? Now they do have to go through a United States inspection standard, but it's not up to par as what we have inland here. So how it affects you is you're getting a lower quality product at maybe a higher price, because they, as a consumer, is at a higher price, but that ability for them to import that cheaper cut of meat, throw it into the American product, it oppresses our prices because there's no competition for it.
So out of those 18 countries, are any one of them China?
Yes.
One of the 18 is China?
Yes.
What percentage
Just recently made we made the trade deal with China on this, and this was supposed to have been started now, during this COVID deal. The 4 main trade is Canada, Mexico, New Zealand, and Australia. Now,
Canada and Mexico, they had a decent relationship with the beef that was coming in until, the organization, which the acronym is COOL, COOL, which some like them, some don't like them. And then that kind of changed the game. What happened there politically behind closed doors that the average person doesn't know about?
So mandatory country of origin labeling was implemented, I think, in 2002, somewhere around in there. And what that did was it required our processors to put a country of origin label on all beef. So that means you were able to differentiate your beef as a consumer in the retail store. What happened is Canada and Mexico decided that mandatory COOL violated several trade agreements. And so they went to the World Trade Organization, and a lawsuit came about. The World Trade Organization determined that it was unfair trade practices by the United States to require mandatory country of origin labeling. Canada and Mexico won that lawsuit, and Congress repealed mandatory COOL in 2015.
Now, politically, who's behind COOL? Who is behind country of original labeling? Because to me, as a buyer, I was having lunch today with my wife and Kai, and I said, "Babe, when you buy the meat, do you care where it's from?" She says, I don't pay attention to it, but is it important where it comes from?" She says, "Should I be curious about it?" I said, "Babe, I'm just asking you. We buy meat all the time. Do you ever look at the label to see where it's coming from?" She said, "No, I don't. But as a buyer myself, I kind of would want to know where it's coming from. I don't think it's a big deal to say, if I'm buying a product on the bottom, it says made in China or made in, whatever it is, I also kind of want to know where my meat is coming from." Why is it such a big deal where people are given a pushback of where the meat is coming from?
Okay. that becomes a very complicated issue. So obviously the main four packing conglomerates or that oligarchy do not want to have to differentiate that meat. They say it's too expensive to do that, to differentiate it in the packing plants. So those processors are members of the board of directors of what we call the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, a very strong cattle industry lobbying group. And so they have determined that mandatory cool is bad for the consumer and bad for the cattle business. The organization called RCAF USA is an organization full or comprised of independent producers across the United States, almost 6,000 members. And they believe mandatory cool is an individual right, is a liberty issue. And so they're the ones that have been, and I'm a part of that group, and we have spent years and years pushing that, because we believe, number one, it's a liberty issue, and number two, the data shows that at the prime of, when Congress repealed cool, we were in the prime of the industry. We were very prosperous at the time, and then as soon as it was repealed, everything fell out of bed and it went backwards. So, but the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, they are against mandatory country of origin labeling. They are very pro-export, very pro-packer, and they to me, it's kind of a pay-to-play system. The packers pay them, sit on the board of directors, and then they get to play. They're required to play how the packers want.
How much similarity is there with your world and Big Pharma? Meaning Big Pharma's got the lobbyists where the biggest lobbying.
Very similar.
Very similar. Okay.
Very similar. It's a power and control. It's all about money, power, and control. Lobbying, power.
Now, Shad, how many of you are there in America? Meaning, how many people like you, cattle ranchers, how many of you are there in America?
700,000.
700,000. What was it before? Was it a lot more?
In 1979, there was about 1.2 to 1.3 million in between.
We went from 1.2 to 1.3 million to 700,000 today from 1979.
That's correct.
What was the biggest drop off, Shad, from 79 to today? Was there a single event that got rid of a lot of people in your world?
No, it was. There wasn't a single event.
It's gradual.
It's a gradual decline because of the lack of competition throughout the industry. And so we have these acquisitions and mergers take place, more power control, and expenses go up. We're not able to create any kind of competition in the marketplace, and how stuff flows downhill.
If there's 10 business owners that are selling their industry, meaning come get involved in my industry. One industry is real estate. One industry is technology. One industry is insurance. Another industry is finance. Another industry is, construction. Then you're standing there and you're selling your industry. Could you easily sell others to consider getting into your industry today?
It's financially impossible. As an individual, it's financially impossible to get in.
Why do you say that? Why do you say that?
Because the overhead, it costs too much to start up. It takes a lot of land, it takes a lot of overhead. And unless the proverbial term in the beef cattle industry is unless you marry it or inherit it, you ain't gonna have it. So, and that's one of the problems that has taken place as a result of this. It's hard for family, everybody's dream is to pass the family farm or ranch down. And that's totally impossible now. You can't do it. Let's take me, for example. My mom and dad had 4 small, nice ranches paid for in the early 80s. The early 80s come on, and if you may not remember this, the interest rates got up there 17 to 21%. There was a fallout. We lose some land. Well, then we basically have to start over. And it's just been an issue of that several times since then. And it's just, these young kids, it is impossible to get a startup. You can get some government help as a first-time landowner or business owner, but the cost of the land, it requires a lot of land, and the cost of the inputs are increasing and gaining, and so it's impossible without a lot of equity or cash in the bank to get a start. It's nearly impossible. And therefore, across America, we have seen thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of youth not return to the family operation after high school or college.
Because of this specific reason.
Correct.
So based on what you know, I mean, I'm assuming you're in a community where you're with other people and you're talking to other cattle ranchers because you're in that world. I'm in insurance. I talk to other insurance CEOs and executives.
Yes.
How many of these 700,000 you think are going to be able to withstand the current challenges they're facing?
That's a good question. And I would say that we could lose through this COVID situation, we could lose plus 1/3 of those this year.
You could lose a third. So we can go from 700,000 to 450,000 in the next 6-7 months.
It is possible, maybe more.
Are you being asked to actually kill the cattle? Are you being asked?
No.
Are they asking you?
No, we are not being asked, and I pray that we do not come to that, and I don't think we will in America. It's a different time than it was 60, 70 years ago. But, so to speak, they're dusting off the books and the protocol is there if it has to take place. And I want the public to understand we have the cleanest, safest, most humane food supply in the world, but real life takes over, and real life has taken over during the COVID deal. So what has happened is with the backup or the backlog, the bottleneck of live cattle on the hoof that can actually move around and moo, has backed up to an enormous amount of numbers that is just staggering. Well, they have a lifespan that must end at some time. So when they're in the feedlot and they're getting ready to be harvested, at the end of that, when they're ready to be harvested, there is a period of time where they can go on past for a few weeks and they can get by. But there will come a time that those cattle have to meet in the supply chain. I mean, it's an ugly real life issue that has to take place. So we are not euthanizing cattle at this point, and I don't think we will. The president put in an executive order that was outstanding and required those supply chains to be running. So we'll see what happens from there, right?
Shad, how many employees do you have working for you right now?
How many what?
How many total employees did you have pre-COVID?
0.
Oh, pre-COVID.
0. I'm on my own. It is me and my widowed mother. We run our operation between Texas and Colorado. She stays on the ranch in Colorado. I'm down here. And I have one older sister that has retired from her job and moved home. She's never been married. And she's kind of helping with my mom now, as my mom is aging and getting elderly. And so she helps up there, but we don't have any employees.
What are your long-term plans? What you seeing what's going on right now? What are you thinking? When you and your mom are having conversations, what are you thinking? You seem like you're young. You seem in your late 30s, early 40s. What are your plans?
That's a great question, Patrick. If this was the year 2014, I would say the future is in our hands, right? We're going to be able to get some of this through. We're going to start being able to buy a little bit more land. We were debt free. All of that came to fruition. And then with the Congress taking mandatory country of origin labeling away, and there was a flood of cattle on the market due to a drought, the prices just collapsed. And to be honest, we have not made any money since 2014 on cattle. And so I don't know what our future holds, to be honest with you. I own a little bit of land. My mom owns the, a good portion of land. She doesn't have any cash in the bank. The land is her cash. We have equity in the land. Her and my dad started in 1959 and put this all together. They started from the ground up, and they want to pass that legacy on to their kids. And I have warned, I have 3 sisters, and I have warned my sisters. I said, she has no cash. We're not making money. We've pulled a rabbit out of the hat to get by the last 4 years. it is a possibility that we could have to sell the land for, if she was to have to go to the nursing home or something like that.
So you've actually considered that. You actually had that conversation with your three sisters.
We are having it more and more every day. It's just a tough industry to be in. And if you're not profitable, it's not good. We're spending, let's say we're spending $1,200 a head to make $900 a head. That's terrible business. We love the life. We love the legacy. But at some point you have to draw the line and say, okay, are we going to be business people? And are we going to lose everything we've put together over the last 60 years and go from there? I don't know. I think you have to be a business person. You have to be smart and you have to be real.
They don't see legacy. They don't see family. They don't see tradition. They don't see any of that stuff. They don't know the stories you have with your pops and the lessons you're going to pass down to your 4-year-old son. They just see profit margin. That's all they see.
That's right.
And
that's right. Well, one thing RCAF USA did in April 2019 is we filed an antitrust lawsuit against those 4 main packers. It was historic in nature. And right now we're in the motion to dismiss phase of that lawsuit. But if that lawsuit goes through, that will be historic in terms of the industry, and it could change the industry by itself. We are, clamoring and hollering, but there's 2 factions in our industry. There's the independent producer, and then there's the globalist. And those 2 factions are fighting right now for what's better for our industry. Sonny Perdue, our Secretary of Agriculture, head of the United States Department of Agriculture, has done more harm to the agricultural industry as a whole than any other Secretary of Agriculture in the history of our nation. We have lost over 50% of our net farm income under his watch. He's a globalist, and we're working hard to get President Trump's ear. I mean, we're every day we got letters. We're calling. We have people on our side. And after my video, I'll tell you, I think the video changed a little bit of the mindset of the American consumer. They now see they depend on others for their supply, right? Their food supply. And I think now with the COVID deal and the backlog of product across the nation, they see that they need to take more responsibility in it. And I think it's a great thing.
Do you have kids?
Yes, I have 1 stepdaughter, Lindsay, and I have a 4-year-old little boy.
Any plans of one day wanting to pass this down to your stepdaughter and your son?
Absolutely. That's the goal. That is every rancher's dream, is to be able to pass this business and this lifestyle. It's a tradition. It's something that we love. It brings a lot of hardship, but it brings a lot of love to the heart too. There's a lot of rewarding experiences in this life. And I shouldn't say it's not about the money, because we have to be able to feed the world at a profit. We can't do it at a loss. And in order to, send that dream on down the road, we have to be successful. And, we do want it as our legacy. That's what it's all about, is your legacy. We're proud to be multi-generational operators. But at this point, it's not looking like it. And I'm telling you, why would I want my son to go through a life of misery? Because, I'm a very competitive person. We're very competitive people. But at some point, you have to have a win. And wins are coming so few and far between, because remember, the cattle producers are not just at the mercies of the market and the corruption. They're at the mercies of the weather. They're at the mercies of drought and floods and blizzards. Take, for example, those producers up in Nebraska and South Dakota in the winter of 2018-19 went through blizzard after blizzard. They lost 1 million head of cattle. Well, when you're losing your livelihood and then they gut punch you with market collapses, it's hard to take. So, the future, I believe the future is positive. I want to believe it is positive, but the reality is there's not a great future for independent producers across the country.
Shad, how much of your fondest memories of you and your father has to do with you guys working together on the ranch?
All of them. I'm going to write a book about it.
All of them.
I've been here. I'm 46 years old. I went to college for 4 years, and that's the only time I was ever away. we were a little different. My mom and dad were putting all of this together, took some hard hits in the 80s, again in 1990, kind of set us back. We recovered from those, but me and my siblings, we were all a part of this. We helped build this. And my dad's dream, God bless him, was to allow us to capture some of this pride, some of this success. So yeah, all of my memories. I mean, he taught me everything I know. We went through good and bad. I could tell you so many stories that make your head swim, right?
That's the beautiful part about legacy business. When you get to work with your dad and you share those stories with your son, and one day your 4-year-old son runs this, and your father essentially is living through, experiencing it through his grandson. So, a couple questions on the complete opposite side. Some may say, the consumer may say, the price of beef went down from $4.16 in 2015 to $3.78 today, which is a 10% drop off, right? And remember, the consumer is very one-dimensional. The consumer doesn't go to the stories. The consumer doesn't remember what you and your father did. The consumer is thinking about, if I can send 10 cents or 10%, I'll go to Target over Walmart. I don't care who's getting my business. I just need to save my money. But you guys lost 40% during that period. So again, the price went down 10%, but your business margins went down 40%.
Correct.
I guess the question becomes the following. Why should the consumer be concerned about you losing 30% to want to buy the product from you versus going and saving that 10% that they're going to get themselves?
Because if, as an individual producer, I go out of business, that makes them rely upon the multinational corporations to provide their food supply, not just beef, but their food supply all around. And we know what they've already done is lower the quality of beef coming into the country, being imported into the country, and the consumer doesn't know where that food safety issue lies. They need to have the choice to do that. And if I'm gone as an individual producer, who fills my shoes now in this time and age? Nobody. Only multinational corporations, the conglomerates, the control.
Why should the consumer care?
Because it's a food safety issue.
Okay, so that's where I'm going. Okay, so if it's a food safety issue, you're saying buying meat from outside of the United States is not as safe as buying the meat that's made in the United States?
I would say that as a personal human being, absolutely. We have the highest quality beef supply, the safest beef supply. We've spent the last 150 years improving our herds. We have the best beef available on the planet. We want that to be differentiated from those people who have not worked so hard to be in the U.S. market. USA beef is the best product in the world. There's no other product that is comparable. We have the safest and the highest quality beef in the world. And I hope the consumers realize that, and I hope they choose that and will pay a little bit more money to local people to do that.
I'm for the small business owner, but I also know, Tyson, JBS, all these guys are going to come out. I mean, you even heard JBS was trying to buy National Beef back in 2009. And that would have been a whole big monopoly. And JBS is a Brazilian-based company, which makes no sense for a company.
Well, let's talk about that, Patrick, because JBS and National Marfrig are both Brazilian-owned. JBS is both owned by the Batista family. Josely and Wesley are the two brothers that are heads of that corporation. And those brothers just got out of prison in Brazil for fraud and unfair market or trade practices in their country. They just got out of prison. Both of those boys spent a year in prison for fraud. In 2017, JBS sent, we were importing Brazilian beef. They sent, not us, they sent it all over the world, rotten meat. They got caught in that scandal. It is a food safety issue like no other. And when you have two, we're selling our souls to other countries. We're depending on other countries. Same way with China. Everybody's talking this week about all of their medical supplies coming from China, right? Nobody knew that. I didn't know that. I'm on a weekly regimen of chemotherapy and have been for a year and a half. I don't know where that comes from. I never thought about it, right? So now we have all these people don't know where their food supply is coming from, and it's all a safety issue, right? I mean, when 2 of our 4 main beef packers are Brazilian owned, foreign owned, and they have that much power, and they've been caught in these fraudulent cases in their own countries, what do you think they're doing in the United States, right? They don't care about the American consumer. And I'm not against the American dream. I love the guy that starts out small, gets big, and grows big. I think that's awesome. But this isn't that. This is a corruption. And when people say, Shad, what would you do to change the industry? I start at the top and I say, we got to end corruption. We have to enforce the Packers and Stockyards Act of 1921, which guaranteed a level playing field for the producer clear to the packer. We have to enforce antitrust laws that we have on the books that keep these acquisitions and mergers from happening. We have these laws. Why aren't they being implemented? Why is the federal government allowing the acquisitions and mergers to gain control? Because it's a part of a globalist economy, a global economy. And I'm fine with a global economy, but it's got to be fair for the producer. It's got to be fair for the independent producer of the United States. Any producer, whether you're producing rocking chairs or cows, right? The American dream is about private property rights. Without your ability to own private property rights, or to own private property, whether it's land or a business in town, you don't have the ability to be a part of a free market system, a capitalistic system. And these are all private property rights that are being taken away from us day by day.
How is it?
Well, let's take, for example, there's in production agriculture, there's these new measures called the global roundtables. And let's take the specific one that I know deeply about is called the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. And what that is was created by the United Nations. They implemented this control mechanism called the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. They implemented it across the world through the World Wildlife Fund. The World Wildlife Fund is a environmental organization that does not believe in private property rights. They're a very enormously money-driven organization that wants to take you off your land. So they have implemented this deal called the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, and it controls production standards from top to bottom. So what it does is they come in at the top of the chain, the supply chain, and they say, okay, you're going to produce this at this cost. You're going to implement these production standards. You're going to do this to your cattle. You're going to do this to your land. They're going to have third parties that come in and audit it. And so then they have you captured, and it creates a bottleneck. And if you don't get on board, you are not allowed to play in the market. And that has already come to fruition in Brazil under the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Soy. In 2016, they implemented that, and a whole host, and I won't say how many, of those Brazilian soybean farmers declined to be a part of the Global Roundtables for Sustainable Soy. They were kicked out of the market, and many of them committed suicide. These are controlled communistic methods that have you embrace you by the neck. They take you by the neck, and you are going to adhere to their production standards from top to bottom, or you're not going to be in the system.
So question for you. There are 3 organizations, it seems like, in your world. I don't know if you can see it or not. WTO, COOL, and USDA, right? USDA is, and you got COOL, which is the country of origin of labeling. Those
COOL is not an organization. COOL, it means country of origin labeling. That is
not an organization at all. It's just a law.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So
you have the USDA and the World Trade Organization, correct?
Can you give us in another industry, like World Trade Organization? I get it. So World Trade Organization, fine. We kind of know who to compare them to. World Health Organization, WTO, WHO. I think they're pretty ran in a similar way, right? Let's put those guys aside.
Right.
Who is USDA in another industry? If you were to say USDA in a different industry is such and such organization, so we can kind of have a parallel.
Well, the USDA is head over the agriculture industry, right? It's the government.
Is that like SEC for financial?
Correct. That's correct.
And are they politically driven or not at all?
Well, they're not supposed to be politically driven, but the fruits of their labor has showed that they are a bit politically driven. You know, we have screamed and yelled for mandatory country of origin labeling, and they have gone against us. We have screamed and yelled on August 19th, 2019. There was a fire in a packing facility, a Tyson meat packing plant in southwest Kansas. It decimated our markets overnight. Overnight, we were in trouble. We asked the USDA and Sonny Perdue, who is the director, Secretary of Agriculture, to investigate that price collapse due to that fire. One fire in one plant decimated our prices in one night, overnight. And we asked for those investigations to take place. And until we, the independent producers, put pressure on Sonny Perdue, the Secretary of Agriculture, and the United States Department of Agriculture, nothing happened. There was no action. They are now, because so many people have spoke up, they are now supposedly in an investigation, but it's been 9 months and we have not heard one thing about that investigation, where it stands or anything.
Largest contributor to World Trade Organization is USA, what we give the most. First place with 11%. Second is China with 9%. How much similarities is there with WTO and World Health Organization, with China trying to also control some of the decision making to get more business funneled from China coming into US?
I don't know. I can't answer that question.
All right. I was just curious to know if there's any kind of a political move being made there on that side. So you go out to dinner this Friday night. Let's just say the market opens up, restaurants open up. You go to dinner. You're ordering steak. What kind of steak are you ordering?
I'm ordering a filet mignon or a ribeye.
And do you ask specifically about the meat and the quality of the meat?
I ask specifically what country it originates in, and most of the time they cannot tell me.
You're being serious?
Yes.
Wow. And if they can't tell you, what do they say?
They say, I don't know. Most of those good cuts, hopefully, are, let's take, for example, you go to a high-end steakhouse in Fort Worth. That's going to be American beef. I mean, there's probably no question to that. But then if you get down into the chain steakhouses, there might be a question to it. I'm hopeful that is all American beef, and I think it is. But then when you go, let's say you're ordering a hamburger from McDonald's, likely it's not American beef.
You're not in, let's just say you're not in your world. You're just an advisor to people that want to eat healthy
Yes.
meat. You want to educate them to ask the right questions. What questions should we be asking as consumers?
Well, I think the consumer is, if the consumer's going into a grocery store or a steakhouse, I think the first thing they should ask is, where does my meat come from? Where does this beef come from? I think that is so important because it creates liberty for the consumer. People often say, we don't want the government getting in on our beef industry. Okay. Well, we are already taxed $1 per head. Every time we sell an animal, we have to give the government $1, okay, per head. We have requirements. They're trying to implement what they call the radio frequency identification system into the beef industry. That's government involvement. But the difference is mandatory cool becomes a liberty issue because it's a law that provides freedom and liberty to the consumer to make a choice. That we've created law from the beginning of our country to enable the consumer to have choice, right? So that's a good law. But these other laws that they want to implement, such as the beef checkoff, is the $1 tax. That's taxation without representation, as far as I'm concerned. Radio frequency identification tags in these cattle. What that is a chip that goes into the cow. They want to know about it from birth to plate. That actually inhibits liberty and freedom to the producer because it's a private property rights issue, right? So they want to know everything you're doing. Well, in America, we're supposed to be able to produce how we see fit, and let the consumer take that choice out, move that choice down the chain.
Very, very interesting. So last question here before I go to a comparison I'll make and then we'll wrap up is, say you leave the business. Let's say you leave the business. You're not in the business anymore. and there's a couple 100,000 other people that also leave the business. Where do they go to? What do they do next?
I don't know.
You seriously don't know?
No. A guy like me, I can get a job somewhere. You know, it's not the job you're going to want, but we have to do things we don't want to do because we have to put food on the table for our family. And most people are like that. But what will happen is there will be a takeover of our industry. The property will become under ownership. You know, some of these guys might not lose all this property, but the ability to produce on it is lost because it's unaffordable. So what happens is the oligarchy takes over the industry down the supply chain, and then a lot of these producers will become, will become serfs to the oligarchy. And I think that's where we're headed.
You're out of the industry. You're speaking at a conference. There's 10,000 people at this event. They hired you to tell them what to do for them to separate themselves from their competitors to make it in your industry, okay? Again, you're a consultant. You're no longer Shad Sullivan, the American cattle rancher. You have decided to go be a consultant for your industry, okay? And you're talking to a convention with 10,000 of these guys that do what you do. And they're asking you, Shad, how do I differentiate myself against my competitors right now to have an upper advantage? What would you tell them?
Well, I go back to what my mom and dad taught me. That was to work hard and never give up. That's what I tell them. Because it's all about work. We work hard every single day. We take the good with the bad. I can remember my dad telling me, Shad, you got to take the good with the bad. And that's what I mean.
I asked that question because you're saying spend $1,200 to make $900. That's not a business model.
No, that's not a business model.
So how do you, I'm a guy that's spending $1,200 and making $900. What do you tell me? Shad, you can't tell me work hard. I come from a family, we all worked hard. What the hell do I really do? What would you tell me?
So then guess what happens? You have to make choices. You have to, you know, think outside of the box. There's a lot of people in this industry that have great minds, but I'll tell you what, a lot of this industry are two income families. I mean, the wife has had to go to work in town to pay just to pay the bills. But you see, we're losing so much money now. Used to that would work a little bit, but we're losing so much equity now that even with the second off-farm job, it's not working. So what I tell people, I would tell people, you got to work, you got to have faith, and you never give up. You never give up. There are smart people in this industry, incredibly smart people. They're innovative. That's why we have the best product in the world. These people are innovative. But not everybody can produce the same, right? Everybody's going to produce different. Everybody's going to have a different idea. So my dad always said, if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it. You know, if it's working, keep doing it. And we've been at the exact same operation for the last 40, 50 years and haven't changed. But it worked up until 2015, and it didn't. So I don't know. We're gonna keep working hard. We're gonna have faith in God, and we're not gonna give up because that's what He asks us to do.
You know what it reminds me of? Here's what it reminds me of. It reminds me of when Walmart first came out in 1962 and a half with Target and Costco and all these Kmart. It was the Super Savings Center, 1962 and a half. And Walmart started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And a lot of the local small mom and pop shop in a small city, you know, that no one knows about, Walmart came in and they're selling milk for a price, and Walmart's got it 20% cheaper. And families started saying, honey, why are we going to mom and shop? Instead of going to Bob's spot, let's go to Walmart. You know, this is a lot cheaper place. Is it similar to what Walmart did to a lot of mom and pop shops and put them out of business?
It's the same thing. It's the absolute, and you have to remember, 80% of rural America is a no stoplight town, right? These cities, these rural towns, the flower shop depends on the farmer and rancher. The tire store depends on the farmer and rancher. The school especially depends on the farmer and rancher. And when these people leave production, those things end. The grocery store ends, everything ends in those small towns. And that's why it's so important that we get competition back in our business.
Who's the Amazon of your world? Who's the Amazon, not the Walmart? Who's the Amazon of your world?
I'm not sure there is an Amazon of our world.
Maybe there's an idea right there. You know, maybe there's an idea right there. I don't know. If you're talking about there's a lot of innovative guys and you got to figure out a way to pivot, maybe I'm changing my business model and seeing, because when Walmart was bullying everybody and nobody thought anybody could go after them, Then came a guy named Jeff who said, hey, I'm going to come after you in a different way. And he did. And now Amazon is scaring the hell out of Walmart, or Walmart has to pivot to compete with Amazon. So I just think there's an opportunity for someone like this to decide to pivot and go in different. I'm not in your world to give you counsel. I'm just curious where you were going to go with that. Shad, we wish you nothing but the best. Thank you so much for spending 30 minutes here with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the time. And I just wish everybody to go to demandUSAbeef.com, sign the petition to enforce mandatory country of origin labeling. I'd like to tell your listeners, since my video, I've had hundreds of thousands of messages asking, where can we get our beef on a local level? Well, RCAF USA has come up with a website called usabeef.org, and you can go there and it will commingle you with producers all across the nation. There's 350 producers from 40 states. You can get it there. And to learn more about mandatory country of origin, go to labelourbeef.com and you can learn more about it there.
We're going to put both links below. I actually went on the website with the 350 different of them, and I saw how it was. It's very user-friendly. Again, we'll put the link below for you to go visit it. Shad, once again, thank you so much for being a guest.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thanks, buddy. Cattle rancher Shad Sullivan, did he influence you to ask the question of, where is this meat from? I'm actually curious to know if it's going to change your way of buying and shopping when it comes down to meat. Comment below. And if you enjoyed this interview, I did another video because I talked about Walmart against Amazon, the war that they have, the $5 trillion war. If you've not seen this video, it's very, very interesting why some believe Walmart is going to come back and compete with Amazon. If you've not watched it, click on this link to watch the video. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, please do so. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.